When I was growing up, I was a mouth breather. I obviously had no idea this was even a bad thing at the time, and neither did anybody else who was around me. It turns out mouth breathing is one of the most detrimental things to your health and also the way that you look, but it's especially detrimental for a child. Children's faces and jawbones are rapidly developing from ages 0 to about 8 or 10. But even around 18 to 20 years old, they experience this rapid growth and development. That's why it's super important that you catch this problem early on and instill proper habits in children. And that's why I wanted to make a video specifically for parents on my top tips for raising a kid to be healthy and attractive, to breathe through their nose, to have high self-esteem, and basically everything that you want for your child as they grow up. Everything that we're talking about in this video is about creating healthy habits. These habits include how your child breathes, swallows, chews, how they stand up. If you can ensure that your child has healthy habits as they grow and develop, then it's very likely that they won't need any orthodontic intervention at a later age. This video is going to be divided up into 5 sections. We're going to start at the youngest age, which is obviously babies and newborn babies, and then work our way up. And I'm not doing this alone. I brought on the help of some great professionals to give their opinions, and I'm also going to share my opinion, starting with tip number 1, which is to make sure that they're not mouth breathing. At what age is it okay for an infant to be breathing through their mouth?
Never. Okay, so think about it. We are all born nasal breathers. It becomes an issue as we develop. We go on the breast, we drink on the breast, we breathe through our noses. If there's a functional issue with the tongue, so if a baby's tongue tied, that really is one of the only reasons a proper latch won't happen during breastfeeding.
Someone in my family just had a baby. The baby, I noticed, has its mouth open and its tongue is just hanging out.
So depending on the age, the tongue protrusion with a newborn is normal.
Okay.
But it goes away, it should be gone by, I think, 6 months or something like that, or less.
So past 6 months, the baby should be breathing through
Absolutely.
their nose. Say I have a newborn baby and I'm going to be raising this kid for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
What would you tell me to do?
If your kid can't breathe through their nose, figure out why. There's a lot of snot-nosed little babies around. That's the issue. That crusty-nosed kid is not breathing through their nose. Again, it comes back to the root cause, getting to the root cause of why you can't breathe through your nose. For me, it was, I grew up in a smoker's house and I was allergic to everything. I grew up and I learned how to breathe through my mouth. It's one thing that parents don't realize is we don't watch our kids sleep. We might for a little bit of time. I mean, I know I did with my kid for a little bit, but watch how they sleep. Watch their sleeping positions. My daughter always snored. My daughter always slept with her mouth open. And I never really thought about it. Mouth breathing is the biggest key. And it's one of the easier things to solve when they're that young.
When I was a kid, I distinctly remember going to bed one night and thinking to myself, I can't breathe through my nose for some reason tonight, so I'll just breathe through my mouth, it's fine. The reality is it's not fine. It's a big deal. If you see your kid breathing through their mouth, it's something that you want to address as early as possible, and like Joe said, especially while they're sleeping. Tip number 2 is to introduce chewing real foods as early as possible.
Then we look at food, and there's so many factors. The texture of foods. I get patients that tell me all the time, we have a very nutritious food. You know, and I said to them, well, nutrition comes in my books. It's twofold. There's nutrition in nutrient content and nutrition in the texture of the food. If you've got both of those, then we can talk about nutrition. Because if like, I had a patient who came in who's this poor little girl was still bottle fed at 8 years old, and the parents were adamant that it was nutritious food, and I'm like, I don't care how much vitamins are going in the body, but if you're not supplementing with movement, then that's malnutrition, because the body reacts to movement. When you move, then certain metabolic pathways open up. Hormones get released, growth hormones, development. Do you know what I mean? You promote the osteoblasts and osteoclasts to move. And so that's a lack of nutrition, because there are certain things that are not being activated that are nutritious.
We feed our kids mush. We don't sit and eat our food long enough. When I do my assessments, I have people eat a bag of crunchy things. And I can't tell you how quickly most of them do it. I would encourage chewing on harder foods when possible, within reason. Health Canada says to introduce solids at 6 months, which you can do. You can introduce solids at 6 months, but solids don't have to be necessarily mush. They can be soft carrots. You can introduce other chewing tools even earlier. There's no reason an infant at 3 months can't chew on something that they're not going to necessarily choke on. You've seen photographs of kids being given chicken bones at 3-4 months just to chew on.
It's important that we as people in general chew and use these muscles. Our bodies were designed to use these muscles of mastication. It's especially important for children to chew and use these muscles, because that helps to create the forward development of their jaws that will create wide arches, nice smiles, nice faces, and healthy airways. It's important that you introduce solid food as early as possible. As Joe said, it can even be something such as soft carrots. And then as your child continues to age, try to make sure that they're chewing on foods that require a lot of work from these muscles, such as raw carrots, raw apples, vegetables, tough meats, dried fruit, nuts, things like this that require a lot of chewing. This one's very important. And then tip number 3 is to limit the amount of time spent slouched over on devices. It's just so obvious that they are breathing through their mouth, that their head is hanging forward, their face is already developing into a really negative pattern. What do you think is causing that in our society? What is the reason that our faces are developing in this way?
Well, there's no one answer to that, but I think that a combination of our world of technology, there's the concept of text neck. We rely heavily on technology to take care of our kids because we lead busy lives, because everybody has to work 20-hour days. We just changed the focus of how we live. I mean, there's still tribes in Mexico and Africa that have that look and have all of their people that come to Canada from other countries that have lived in clear breathing countries. They have beautiful full arches. It's definitely a First Nations of the world thing. Braces don't exist in tribes in Africa. It's not necessary.
So I know this one is really hard, right? Because we live in a world of technology and e-learning and iPads and iPhones. But this is a very, very important tip. There's a direct relationship between your posture and your tongue. What that means is that if your child spends a large portion of the day slouched over and they develop forward head posture, it's going to be hard for their tongue to sit on their upper palate. They're going to be more likely to mouth breathe, and as we know, that causes a large cascade of effects. Some tips that I can give on this: one is to potentially use a standing desk for your child. Like, I use a standing desk, and maybe something you could do is to say, okay, I'll let you play this game on the iPad, but you have to do it standing, and also make sure that their mouth is closed. And this leads into tip number 4, which is to try to move around more, to get your kids to be moving more and using their bodies. And Dr. Shia Faragella has a very interesting take on this, so listen to that.
I don't think things are the same. I think things have changed. The biggest thing I would say is that, okay, the internet is not that, how many years has the internet been around? Well, let's just suppose 20 years of internet, where I'm sure it was in the 90s or whatever, but let's just suppose there's 20 years, and then that creates like more sedentary lifestyle. And so the sedentary lifestyle, I think, is a big factor. There is something about sitting down for too long that makes you not develop as well. So, I would say that children may have moved 8 to 10 hours exercise, which is not called exercise back a few hundred years ago, but that's how their lifestyles were. They were either riding horses or, helping in the farming or whatever it was. So that intense activity has an effect on us. And I can't put my finger on exactly what goes on, but it does. Let's suppose one of the reasons is that you're burning more energy. You're now got more carbon dioxide. You're becoming more tolerant to carbon dioxide. You don't need to mouth breathe because you're so tolerant to that elevated carbon dioxide, because you're burning it so much that you're more likely to nasal breathe. And if that's the case, you're less likely to drop your tongue. And so maybe that's a possibility.
And tip number 5 has to do with doing myofunctional therapy to correct the muscles of their face before worrying about their teeth and their jaws.
I'm a strong believer in getting the muscles right. And I'm trying to get as many orthodontists to try and do some oral myology beforehand, even if it's like for 2 or 3 weeks, just to get him. And every single patient that I treat always gets their oral myology done 8 weeks before I do anything. So we're doing 8 weeks of oral myology just to try and get that sorted. And And if it's not sorted, then we don't go to the next phase. I'll extend it even longer.
So this tip is for parents who are considering having orthodontics for their child. Maybe considering having braces or a palatal expander. What I would do if it were my child is I would have them do myofunctional therapy first, during and after treatment. The reason why has to do with what Dr. Shiab Faragella just said, where he said to get the muscles right first. What he means is to focus on making sure that the tongue is up on the palate, that they're swallowing properly, they're breathing properly, their lips are functioning properly, because this is the underlying cause of the symptom. So the symptom is they may have a narrow palate, they may have crooked teeth, they may be experiencing issues, but the cause of that is the tongue. What I would do is I would try to get the tongue and the function right first, because that may correct the issue on its own. Remember, children are developing very, very quickly. So if you've noticed, everything that we've talked about in this video is about using our bodies the way that they were designed to be used. We were designed to breathe through our nose, so try to make sure your child is not mouth breathing. We were designed to use our bodies to move, to run, to squat, to jump. Try to make sure your child is getting an adequate amount of movement. We were designed to use these chewing muscles, so try to make sure that you introduce foods that help your child to develop those jaw muscles as early on as possible. And lastly, of course, we were designed to have our tongue on the roof of our mouth with our lips closed. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that it can potentially help the next generation, because if you catch these problems early, it's a lot easier to solve them and it's a lot less costly. So I wish you all the best. Thanks for watching the video. Please hit subscribe and like this video if you haven't, and share this with a parent or a child who could benefit from this information. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next video.